Hello there everyone, Nubkeks here. It's been a while, but I'm back for a raid leader review. Let's do it. We're looking at Mythic Sludgefist here today. A couple of things to note. Because of this delay, we have a few major changes to the fight that you're going to do and the fight that we'll discuss here in the video. I mean, the strategy stays the same, but it's actually going to be easier for you guys in a number of different ways because it was nerfed. The first nerf to mention, and I will mention this in terms of healing comp, I am playing Disc Priest in this fight. We are actually running 2 Disc Priests. Disc Priest had Spirit Shell nerfed from 100% of your healing to 80%, which is a huge nerf. I mean, it's basically a 20% nerf to Disc Priest. So Disc Priest, I would not necessarily recommend going out of your way at all to get 2 of them for this fight. They're still good, but they're certainly not needed at all. You could pretty much run any healers now at this point. I think you'd be pretty much just fine. Bit of damage reduction. Obviously, Spirit Links and stuff are good for when you crash into the pillars. It's a super fun fight. This is, there's a lot of healing to do, but you'll be fine. The other thing that happened very recently, actually last week, this week, was that they nerfed a lot of aspects of Sludgefist. So you're going to have longer to do the soaks at the pillars. You're going to have more space. The AoE stomp that he does is smaller. You can go further with the chains before they snap, that sort of thing. So they've just, generally speaking, made the fight a lot easier. All of the hard stuff, all of the stuff that is punishing is now a lot more forgiving. I would say in particular, aside from just making the fight generally a lot easier, this also makes it a lot more forgiving to melee. We ran with only 2 melee DPS because we have 2 melee healers. We have a Mistweaver and a Holy Paladin. Then we ran 1 Unholy DK, and we ran 1 Arms Warrior. I think he's Arms. I can't remember. Maybe he's Fury in this fight. Don't remember. But that's what we ran. And then the rest we had 5 healers, 2 tanks, of course, and then the rest were ranged DPS. You can run more melee now. I think you could easily have 6 melee, no problem. You could probably go up to 8, pretty much no problem. More than that, it starts to get a bit spicy. But basically, because the stomp is smaller, you've got way more space for people to spread out, for the melee to come and spread out. It's much easier. The chain stretching further makes that melee job also much easier, so you will be just fine. Let's hit play and let's take a look at this fight. Here we go. So you start off with a roar. Obviously, you're knocked back. Okay, so this is the first thing with the chains, in case you haven't seen it. I mean, you probably seen it, right? But you get these 2 markers. We pre-positioned over here, kind of in front of this pillar near this wall. You could be even further up. You could be at this gate if you wanted to be. I don't think it particularly matters. You should have plenty of space at the end of the fight to deal with it. It's basically in terms of where that initial rubble drops down, because the rubble does get baited onto players. But you've got a few seconds to get to your partner and then spread out. And you should be pre-spread. And again, your spread should look something like this. So we got these 2 players at the edge. We're at the edge. And then we've got other players. You can see how nicely we're spread. It's actually quite an intuitive thing to do on this fight because the chains are so visual, so visible. The reason being, new Mythic mechanic. Here it is. Every time the boss does this destructive stomp, it also does this AoE called Seismic Shift around everyone. It does a fair chunk of damage. It will also do these seismic shifts at the start of each phase after phase 1, after the first pillar. You just need to be spread out. Again, you're going to have a lot more space at the front because the boss stomp is smaller, so you should be just fine. One thing, we did have a weak aura here. This is saying like who leads who with your chain pair. Honestly, never use this. This was not very important at all, so I don't think you even need to get it. To be honest, it's pretty obvious where you have to move with your chain partner 99% of the time. One thing we did use the weak aura for, which I think was quite helpful, was that there would be bait groups. So in order to deal with the chain slam, you need to have the person who's targeted by chain slam, their partner, and then 2 other people go in. So we would have a weak aura, which would assign people. They'd start saying bait over their head, and it just makes it very clear. You know exactly who the people are that are soaking the chain slam. They know that to get over to it, they just run over with their partner. It's pretty chill, honestly. They get in and they do it, and they're good. It's going to prioritize tanky specs like warlocks, mages, balanced druids, that sort of thing. Hunters a bit as well, though they're not that tanky. I'm not sure why it prioritized them. We just made sure I made sure anyway to put spirit shells on the hunters as much as I could. They do the chain slam. They get yoinked in. and then they're going to get knocked out again. So you can see my Spirit Shell is pretty much ramped up for this roar. Bam, Spirit Shell, we shoot up the healing meter. So that's where I did mine. More important is to have, I think, your priest probably Spirit Shell on the pillar. I think that's more important. The pillar is the biggest single chunk of damage all in one go. And if anyone dies, it's really bad because you'll lose all that DPS. So that's sort of my recommendation. You can see here the tanks come out, and then I think it's actually DPS there. And then they're going back out. Here's the other major part of the fight. Again, this bit will be easier if we let the boss hit. So you see it makes these 4 soaks. There's one underneath the boss that you can't see. These are now, they trigger more slowly, so you have more time. The way we split this up was relatively simple. Okay, so we had 2 tanks handle one of the soaks. Then we had the 4 melee players would handle this one. Then we would have 3 hunters, and whoever they were partnered with would handle this one over here. And then the remainder of the ranged would handle this one over here. This works pretty well, honestly. Yeah, even if the only issue would be if you had 2 hunters assigned, it can be 2 anythings, like any two ranged can do this soak. But just if you have only 2 particular range selected, they could be paired together. You just have to make a call on the fly. Like, okay, Naishlarn and the Northwind were due to do this soak, but they're together. They need one more pair just to have a bit of, of fail safe to make sure that it actually does get soaked, because it splits, as you will see in a second. Right? So you come and do this soak. When you soak the first pair, it splits into 2 smaller things. You can see the 2 smaller things here and here. Again, I believe this is now slower. So this should be fairly easy. The hard one is the tank one, but again, the boss is taking like double damage during this stun phase. The tanks having to do a little bit extra is totally fine because they don't have big damage CDs to commit anyway, or it's fairly easy for them to do it compared to a DPS, so they can do the hardest job. You could always assign a couple of melee players or a couple of healers or something to go with the tanks if your tanks are having a really hard time. Basically, the rule of thumb that we had was that, if we come over, is that 1 tank would go to the front, 1 tank would go to the back, and then I think the front tank would go left and the back tank would go right. So they'd sort of rotate around, because these, the little split, it can split any sort of way. It can be front and back, it can be left and right, whatever. So you just need to make sure that you are spread out within the soak. You can see the tanks there did a really good job. Look at that. It's coming up to the soak and they're spread out. This is even easier now. The chain stretches even further, so very, very forgiving. But yeah, just make sure you're stretched out in the soak. And then again, for the tanks, because there's only 2 of them, they need to have a plan on where to go. For the ranged, like we had about, look how many people are in there. It's like almost impossible for them to miss soaks. In a way, though, that actually sometimes makes it worse, because people get lazy. They're like, oh, I can just tunnel DPS. There's like 7 other people here. I'm sure they'll get it. And then the soak doesn't happen, and it's pretty bad. So here, this is one of the other nasty overlaps of the fight. Right, one of the nasty overlaps of the fight. Oh, before that, I should mention for DPS CDs, right? See, the first pillar's on 1 minute. Okay, because the boss fights you for 1 minute and then he does his charge. The first pillar happens 1 minute in, he's stunned for 10 seconds. Then you fight him for a minute, he charges at 2 minutes 10, stunned for 10. You fight him from 220 to 320, then he's stunned for 10 seconds, and so on and so forth. We bloodlusted the final pillar, the 4th pillar, which I think you should still probably do. So here's a little tip as well that you can use. Also worth mentioning, not only the tanks doing the hard job, but as a healer, this is my general rule of thumb for this fight, right? That I was approaching as a healer, which was that during the regular phase, DPS are blowing all their CDs on the pillar phase, okay? So during a normal phase, the DPS are going to move for me, because I've got loads of healing to do during that phase. I have to do my whole Disc Priest ramp up. I'm not moving for them. They are moving for me. And then in return, during the pillar phase, I'm not really doing much healing. There's just an initial burst of damage, but they're blowing their cooldowns. You can see all these combust mages popping off here. I will move more for them. So that's sort of like the trade-off there. It's like, okay, during a regular phase, DPS should make extra effort to just move for the healers and make their life easier because they're doing the hard stuff. And then during the pillar phase, the healer should return the favor. But yeah, coming into this, you can use this knockback because the chains are gone to pre-spread around the room. So the first position was over near here. Second position is kind of in the middle between these two pillars. Just be roughly spread out. Again, this is the other nasty overlap. You can see here what's happening is that you need to find your buddy, but these circles are exploding. So you can actually just run over to your buddy and be ready. Then the chains come in. You can even leave it to find your buddy if you're close enough together until after the chains, and then you can split and you'll be okay. Worth noting for any Disc Priest players that this Innervate was super important to actually have enough mana for the Innervate after the third pillar. We had a few wipes because Innervate was slow. That's okay. But anyway, this phase, as you can see, I mean, there's just more and more rubble falling throughout the phase. The ambient raid damage just increases for every pillar that's destroyed. But other than that, the phase is a carbon copy of itself. So, yeah, again, the boss is just tanked up here this time. He'll be charged into this pillar. So you want to start moving over when it's coming up to the Hateful Gaze. And again, you can see that we're split. So again, Hunter's coming over here, the tanks in the far pillar, melee on the one that's closest to boss, and then ranged taking this one. So again, here you can see that we're going to spread out. We're going to move a bit further out, and we're all good. So yeah, that's basically what you're going to be doing. And then we repeat this like 3 times. So we'll just go through the rest of the fight. I think you're pretty chill in terms of what you can see. In the top left, you can see the sort of big externals that we had assigned to each pillar. You basically just want to hit the biggest group. So for us, our range group was the biggest. So just try to drop like the links and the barriers to hit the range. You just want to reduce damage on as many players as you can. Obviously, priests have no armor. They're going to get fucking chunked by everything in this fight because it's physical damage. AMZ from Death Knights, for example, does nothing because there's no magic damage. And then specs like, you know, like your Resto Shaman will actually be fairly tanky because they've got mail armor, shields, and then obviously like a Holy Paladin with a shield and plate armor is going to be very survivable. You know, that sort of stuff. Again, the positioning for this third set is sort of like in the middle of the room. Okay, here we go. This is sort of the point around Pillar 3 for healers and for planning your healing, by the way, is where you are going to, you're going to need more healing CDs here. Like, you know, if you drop like a Tide before Pillar 1 and we've got Link on Pillar 1, right? Those don't come back until right before Pillar 4. So sort of around Pillar 3, roughly, is where things get spicy, where it's tough. And then after Pillar 3, we come and we use this whole end of the room. It's super easy. There's way more falling rubble, but it's super chill. So we use all this sort of end of the room near Pillar 3. Again, this is even easier for you guys because the stomp is smaller now, so even less stress. And then we just finished the fight near Pillar 4. So you can see the health bar. It's getting pretty spicy now. The ambient damage is ramping up a lot. And there's just not a lot of healing cooldowns left, right? There's not a lot of healing cooldowns. The easiest thing to do, right? Because, you know, a 3-minute healing cooldown, you could leave one of them to here, but you only get to use it once in the fight. You're better off using those once per fight anyway, like Health Stone and Health Pots on this like 5-minute fight. You're best off just using those here at this point. You can see that we're low on mana here, and that's okay. For Power Infusion, by the way, do Fire Mages on pull so they get better RNG to get their Combust back for the first pillar. Gives them more cooldown reduction, the haste. And then you can use, honestly, you can just do Fire Mages in each pillar. I did an Affliction Warlocks on the last pillar. They blast really hard as well, but yeah. And there we go, the 4th pillar. And then you're pretty much at this point just using whatever space you have left, right? Using whatever space you have left. Tank the boss near here. If he does come to the end, you just charge him into the wall and everyone stacks in. We had barrier in the 2nd pillar, so whatever external like barrier type CD you have on the 2nd pillar, just use that again here on this final one. So again, you're just using the space that you've got. And you're not overly worried about position at this point. The boss, he falls over, probably even, I think we kill him before he even does his charge. So just be resetting your positions. The hardest thing on this fight is certainly the soaks. Soaking is the hard part, right? Soaking on the pillars. They made it easier, but it's still going to be tough. You're going to wipe a lot of that because you have to be reasonably quick, relatively quick, and you're fine. So we died there. She got slowed walking through the pool. I moved 2 forwards too fast. And we died because of it. But yeah, that's the fight. Like, this is actually a super fun fight. This was, I think, for me, the most fun fight to progress so far in the raid. The Nathria is pretty cool so far, which we're on at the moment. Yeah, this one was really fun. It's great fun. I think it's fun because although it's like, if you miss a soak on a pillar, basically everyone dies and it's game over. But it's very fast. You're very fast to wipe, which can normally be kind of annoying. Like one person misses a soak and everyone dies. But I think because there's so much to min max in terms of like your movement, min maxing your HPS during this middle phases, min maxing your DPS, getting as much as possible out during those pillar phases. I think that's so rewarding. It actually makes for a pretty good fight. And just be careful about wiggling too much, like on those AoEs, so you don't murder each other. But yeah, that's pretty much the fight. Again, sort of pre-moving and being ready, just understanding the areas of the room you're in. That's it. That's the fight. It's simple enough, actually. It's actually quite simple, and it's a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoyed. I can answer any questions you've got in the chat, in the comments down below as well. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.